We begin today the Gemara on the last line on Daf Mem Bava Metzia. The Gemara here is discussing the halachas of kinyan chalipin. So, in connection to this, the Gemara brings Amar Rav Huna. Rabbi said in the name of Rav Huna as follows. A person says to his friend, Mechoir li be'elu. Sell me what you have with the following, with this. And he gives him an amount of money that he has in his hands, and he doesn't specify at all what amount of money there is. Kana. He'll acquire with this money. So how does he acquire with money? We learned already a few times before, when it comes to metaltalin, any movable items, paying money, kinyan kesef, does not take effect. You have to have meshicha, or as we learned before, chalipin. Over here, the buyer gave a wallet with money without specifying the amount. It's kaina. Why is that? So at this point, the Gemara understands the reason why kaina is because this is considered to be like chalipin. Because he doesn't ask him how much money there is here, so obviously he's not taking it as a payment of money, as kesef. He's taking it as chalipin. And if it's as chalipin, so it's an exchange. The din of chalipin, that works for the kinyan of metaltalin. However, the yeshle olav eina. Still, there is a eina on this, because I think Gemara here will spell out the point about the eina and also the point that I just mentioned. Let's see. Says the Gemara, Kana, so he'll acquire with this money, even though he did not do an actual act of a kinyan, of meshicha, which is usually the kinyan that works for metaltalin, not kinyan kesef. However, the kivan lekapit, since he's not particular about the amount of money, Kana, so he does acquire with the money that he gave him. The chi chalipin dami, because this is compared to chalipin. If he's not being medayik on the amount of money, obviously it's not a payment of money, rather it's just giving him an item like chalipin. When you give an exchange, you give one item and in return the kinyan takes effect. The Gemara will later address that we already concluded before in the Gemara that matbeya, money, cannot be an item used to create kinyan chalipin. Now, v'yeshli olav eina, why is there eina in this case? Regarding chalipin, you just give a handkerchief for any item, and in return you buy an object which is of a much greater value. The handkerchief doesn't even have to be a shava pruta. So why in this case is there eina? That if the payment that he gave is not for the value of the item that he bought, then if it's more than a sixth, as the halach is, then it's a mekach tos. So why is there a din of eina here if this is chalipin? Answer is the mocher li be'elu kama. Because the language used over here was, sell to me with this that I'm paying you. So even though it is a kinyan chalipin, as the Gemara understands now, but nevertheless, because the language used is mocherli, so it has to be of the value of the item that he's buying. Rav Abba though said in the name of Rav Huna, mocherli be'elu. In this case, where you say, buy, that sell me, that is, with this amount of money, and it's not specified how much money it is, kana, you acquire, and ve'le olavina. And so you acquire, like we explained before, because this is similar to chalipin, and in fact there is no eina here. Even though the term of mechair, sell me, was used, but nevertheless that language does not mean that he's particular, that it should be the amount, the value of the item that he acquires. Because it's kinyan chalipin, it doesn't matter, and there's no eina that applies here. Okay, now the Gemara says, according to what we just learned from Rav Huna, pshite, it would be obvious that domim, ve'em makbid aleim, that if the buyer is paying money, and he's paying an amount of money, and the seller is not at all particular what the amount of money is, so then in this case, then in such a case, the kinyan takes effect from metaltalin, even if kinyan kesef, paying money, does not take effect from metaltalin, but because he didn't specify the amount of money, obviously he's not being medayik on the money as a payment, but rather it's like chalipin. Okay, but now the question of the Gemara is, how about if the case would be in the reverse? Chalipin. If the kinyan being made here is clearly a kinyan of chalipin, it's an item used, a handkerchief or any other item that's being used, where the kinyan will take effect, and in exchange, the item is acquired. But here, in this case, the seller is particular looking at the value of this handkerchief or this item that he got for the chalipin. So what's going to be the halacha in this case? Do I say that because he's being particular about it, so therefore it does have to be the value of this item, and therefore it's going to be like the kinyan of domim, and if it doesn't have that value, then it's not going to take effect or not? So if he's medayik, if he's makbid, and therefore it's a kinyan of domim, so then in fact no kinyan will take effect at all, because then this is a kinyan of kesef, and if it's a kinyan of kesef, it doesn't work for metaltalin at all. So Rav Barava says, Toshema, I'll bring you a raya from the following brayse. The person is holding on to his cow and he's standing there in the marketplace. And his friend comes over to him and says to him, why are you standing here with your cow? So he answers him, I'm looking to actually acquire a donkey with this cow that I have here. And his friend tells him, I have a donkey that I can give you. And he asks him, and he's particular. He says, and how much is the value of your cow? He says, bekach v'kach. This is its value. And then his friend asks him, and how much is the value of your donkey? And he says, bekach v'kach. This is the value. So now, moshach bala chamoyres apara. If the owner of the donkey took the para into his possession, but v'lehispik bala para limshachas chamoyer. But the owner of the cow did not get a chance to take the chamoyer into his possession. Ad shemesa chamoyer. The donkey died first. Loi kana bala chamoyres apara. There's no kinyan that took effect over here at all. So what do we see over here in this case? If they were not particular about the value of the cow and the donkey, then I would say that this is a case of chalipin, where when the bala para took the chamoyer into his possession, or the reverse of the bala chamoyer took the para into his possession, automatically the kinyan takes effect, as it always works with chalipin. When the seller gets the item of the chalipin, then right away the kinyan of the item takes effect. So over here as well, if it would be a kinyan of chalipin, even if the donkey died afterwards, the kinyan is already in effect. So over here, what is it saying? That if the donkey died before the balapara took it, the kinyan did not take effect. Why didn't it take effect? So the Gemara explains, Shmamina, the reason is, because from here we could learn, chalipin makpid alein, a case where people are exchanging things as chalipin, but as it was in this case, that they were particular about the value. Each one asked the other, how much is your cow worth? How much is your donkey worth? So over here, it's not a kinyan b'teiris chalipin. Over here, the kinyan is that they're exchanging it for the value, the money value that the other item has. And therefore, like kana, you don't acquire when you take one item in exchange for the other, you're just getting a payment of value, of money really. So a payment of money, of value, is not a kinyan for metaltalin, and therefore the kinyan did not take effect. If the donkey dies before the other person did meshich and took it into his possession, there is no kinyan. So here I see this proves this point that if it's chalipin, but you makbid on the value, so then it's not chalipin. Then it's really a kinyan of domim, of money, and it doesn't take effect. So the Gemara explains like this. Amar Rave, so Rave says, no, that's not the pshat of it here. Otu, now really going here, first he goes back to Bechlal, to the shaila we asked before, about chalipin, when the person receiving this handkerchief or whatever item it is for the chalipin, he's particular about its value. And he says like this, Otu chalipin, b'shuftini askinon, the chalipin that it says in the pasuk, shalafish nale, that if a person gets an item, a shoe, and whatever value it is, it doesn't matter, and the kinyan takes effect. So this chalipin that the pasuk says takes effect. Who is it talking about? Is it talking about a fool that doesn't care about the value? He cares about the delay kapti. They don't care about a value. He does care about the value. Elakol chalipin mikbet kapti. A person is always makbet to see exactly the value of what it is that he's getting in exchange. But nevertheless, v'kana, the pasuk says that by chalipin it will be kaina even if it's not the value of the item that he's acquiring. So therefore, that is the chiddush of chalipin, that every chalipin we could assume that the person is makbid and pays attention to the value of this handkerchief that he's getting. But nevertheless, even if it has no value, you still kaina. So therefore, that's not a question. Even if you're makbid, the kinyan will still be a kinyan of chalipin and not a kinyan of domim, which then the kinyan would not take effect because it's metaltalin. Now, so going back now to the braise, why we're here in this braise with the bala chamoyer and bala para, why are we saying that if there was the meshicha of the para and then the chamoyer died before there was a meshicha for the chamoyer, that the kinyan did not take effect? Why not? The answer is because there's a certain detail that we have to add here. The case of here is so in the end, what he told him is, I'll give you my donkey, not only for this cow, because they were talking about the value of what the value of the donkey is, what the value of the cow is. Then it turns out that the donkey is more valuable than the cow. So therefore he says, I'll give you this chamoyer bepara tle. In exchange, you'll get a cow plus a lamb. And then what happened was, the bala chamoyer did the meshicha over the para, but vadayin le mashach hasatle. He didn't do any meshicha on the tle, on the lamb. So he didn't yet do the full meshicha in order to exchange, to bring about the kinyan for the chamoyer. And therefore, if the chamoyer dies, there is no kinyan here yet, and is not and therefore there's nothing. So that's the reason why it's not kaina, because there was a para and a tle, which you had to do meshicha for both of them for the kinyan to take effect. And now the Gemara goes back to the statement itself that Rav Huna said before, that when it comes to a kinyan of domim, and you're not particular about the amount of money that's here in this wallet that you give the seller, then the kinyan takes effect. And what the Gemara said before, at least seemingly, that the pshat here is that it's like chalipin. Because he was not particular about the payment, the value of the money, so it's like chalipin and takes effect for metaltalin. Al-Mamas, the Gemara goes back to this point. What did we say before? Sell me this item for this money, and he doesn't specify how much money there is there. Kana, you acquire, and v'yesh le'alavina. But because he used the term of mechayr as a sale, so therefore there is aina here if the amount of money is not the value of this item. So the question is, how is he kaina? Is he kaina because it's like chalipin? Lame. So should we say then that Savar Rav Huna holds matbeya nasa chalipin, that a coin could be used to create the kinyan of chalipin? We already had before the conclusion. The Gemara said that we see from a Brais, and all the Amiroim held that a matbeya cannot be used for chalipin. Is Rav Huna an exception to this? So the Gemara answers, loy, that's not the pshat. Over here, really, the reason why a kaina is not because this is compared to chalipin. Really, it is a kinyan of money. Usually, kinyan kesef, money, does not work to create a kinyan for metaltalin. But this case, though, is an exception. What's the reason it's an exception? Because Rav Huna is like Rabbi Yechanan. Rav Huna's opinion is like Rabbi Yechanan. The Amar, Rabbi Yechanan explained that we had this before in the Gemara, and the Gemara soon will discuss this more at length. Rabbi Yechanan holds that really dvar Torah mois kainis. Minat Torah, the kinyan of kesef does work for metaltalin. And Asher brings before, the source of this is just like you find when you are paida, hektish. It could work with being paida with kesef. It's the same for every kinyan. The minat Torah, the kinyan of metaltalin, would work with kesef. Why did Chachamim say that only when the buyer takes it into his rishos, then the kinyan takes effect? Reason is, Gzeira Chachamim decreed, because what happens, Shema Yoimar, the seller will come along and say, Yoimar Lo, will say to the buyer, Nisrfu chitecha baliyah. You bought it already, it was yours, but it was sitting in my storehouse, and a fire broke out, and it got burnt, and he's not going to bother, the seller's not going to bother to go and out of his way to save it from the fire, because he says, it's not mine anymore. It's his loss. So what the difference does it make to me? So therefore, Chachamim instituted that no, the kinyan should not take effect until the buyer takes it. So as long as it's in the storehouse of the seller, so it's still his, and he can still retract from the kinyan, and it's valuable to him. And if there's a fire, he's going to want to save it. What happens if the price of it would go up? Then he can sell it for more money. So it's still his, and he's going to save it. So that's the takana of the Chachamim, why there's no kinyan until there's a Mashiach, until the buyer takes it. So now, therefore, we say as follows: Milsa the shchicha goes rabbanan. If this kinyan of is being done in the common fashion, regular kinyan of kesef, there Chachamim decree that the kinyan of kesef should not take effect. But a milsa the loy shchicha. But if it's a kinyan of kesef in an unusual manner, like the case we're talking about over here, a person gives you an amount of money unspecified, and the seller is not even particular about it. Such a case, such a kinyan of kesef, even for metaltalin, legoza barabanan. The decree of the Chachamim does not take effect. It does not apply here. Now the Gemara continues and just clarifies regarding the point we said before, that this is not about chalipin. Amalei marhune bereid Rav Nachman Rav Ashi atun hachim masnitala. You learned the halacha of Rav Huna the way you taught it, that it's like chalipin, and therefore you thought that maybe he meant to say that there is actually a kinyan of chalipin here with money, with hamatbeya. But we learned it differently. We learned very clear what Rav Huna meant to say. That Rav Huna clearly said, that there is no kinyan of chalipin that's created through a matbeya. So therefore it's clear that what Rav Huna meant to say before is not because of kinyan chalipin. When you have this unspecified amount of money that's used for the kinyan of metaltalin, the kinyan is not because of chalipin. Rather, as we just explained, because it's an unusual type of kinyan kesef, and the gezeira of the chacham does not apply, and the kinyan takes effect even for metaltalin. Okay, now the Gemara goes on to a new subject regarding the kinyan of chalipin. Bameh koinen. The object that's being used for the kinyan of chalipin, with what object, or really whose object is being used here for the kinyan of chalipin? Rav says, B'keilov shel kaina. It's the buyer that has his vessel or his handkerchief, and the buyer gives it to the seller, and in exchange, the kinyan takes effect that the item of the seller is now acquired to the buyer. And the reason why it works this way, because the nichale le kaina, they'll have a makne kaina, ki heiche de ligme veliknile. because the koine is interested that the makna, the seller, should acquire his handkerchief so that he should make up his mind and he should be ready to then sell the item that he wants to sell him. That's why the kinyan of chalipin works this way. But Levi explains, no, bekelo shel makna. The kinyan of chalipin actually works in the opposite. The seller takes his handkerchief or whatever item he wants to use for chalipin and gives it to the buyer, and when the buyer receives this item, that's how the kinyan takes effect. The item that the seller is selling also is sold to the buyer. And the Gemara says, come on. We're going to soon explain exactly what's the reason for this, what's the logic behind this, that it's the buyer that gives, it's the seller that gives the buyer the item, or the handkerchief of the item that's going to create the kinyan chalipin, and that's how the kinyan of chalipin is created. All right, so the Gemara actually right now begins and brings the explanation for why it works this way. So now Rav Huna said to Rav as follows. According to Levi, that says that the kinyan of chalipin takes effect with the seller giving his keli to the buyer, and then along with that, or after that, it affects the kinyan of the object that the seller wants to sell. If so, it comes out hakakani ara agav glima, that you can acquire a piece of land along with selling a garment first, because the kinyan of chalipin works not only for metaltalin, it works also for a piece of land. And how is this working over here? The seller is giving to the buyer this handkerchief to lift up, to acquire, and then along with it, through this kinyan, it seems, of this garment, of the chalipin, it also acquires a piece of land. The question is, if so, comes out, so we're talking about properties, which is karka, and this is the expression the Mishnah says in Kedushin, properties that are called nechasim shesh lamachrayis. These are properties that can take responsibility. You can have it. It's here. It's available to use to collect a loan from it. So you have a karka, v'niknen im nechasim shesh lamachrayis, and they get acquired in a kinyan along with other properties which are metaltalin, which have no achrayis, meaning you can take no responsible over it. You can move it from one place to another. But the question is, in the Mishnah in Kedushin, we learned regarding the kinyan of Agav. And when it comes to the kinyan of Agav, it works the other way around. As the Mishnah there says, Nechasim she'em lemachrayis, when you have items that have no achrayis, in other words, metaltalin, how could you acquire them? Niknim im nechasim she'esh lemachrayis. They're acquired Agav along with a kinyan that you make on karka. When you make a kinyan on the karka, along with it, the kinyan will take effect on metaltalin. But based on the way Levi is explaining the kinyan of chalipin, it seems like the opposite is happening here. The makna, the seller, is giving the buyer a metaltalin, a glima, a shirt, a handkerchief, and along with it, you then acquire also a piece of karka. So how does that work? Amalei. So Rav answered back and said, "You have a Levi hacha. If Levi himself would have been here, have a mapik la'apach pulsa denura, he would take out on you sparks of fire." Which is an expression that's used also for a certain kind of chaydim, because this question is not at all in place. Mi savris glima maknalei. Do you think that what's happening over here is that he's selling him the shirt, and then agav the shirt, he's also selling him a piece of land? That's not what's happening. Rather, the way the kinyan of chalipin works here, according to Levi, is as follows: with this benefit or pleasure that the seller is receiving by the fact that the buyer is ready to receive this gift of this item from him, that is what brings him, he receives this hana, so in exchange he makes up his mind that he's going to sell what he's selling. So it's not that along with the glima, it brings along the kinyan on the glima, on this handkerchief, is a kinyan that also takes effect for a piece of karka, if you're selling karka. No, it's a hana. What we're saying over here is that the seller gets a certain ana of the fact that the buyer is ready to receive this gift. And it's as a result of that ana that the kinyan of chalipin then takes effect in exchange that he's giving over the item that he's selling him, which could be even karka as well. So the Gemara here brings that this machlekes of Rav and Levi ketanoi. It's a machlekes tanoim. Do we use the keli of the kaina or the keli of the makna? Pasuk says this is the source of the kinyan of chalipin. V'zayis lefnim beYisrael. This is what was before always by Yidden, ala geulav, ala tmura, to redeem or to exchange. L'kaim kol davar, to establish something. Shalaf ishnala, you take off the shuv and aslan riyayu, you give it to your friend. So this shalaf ishnala is the kinyan of chalipin. So the Gemara translates or the Braisa says, what is the pasuk talking about? The term gula here means when there's a sale. In other words, when you're selling something to someone and he's paying for it. As we see in the pasuk, it says lo yigal, you should not redeem. Speaking about redeeming hektish, when you pay. So over here as well, gula means when you're buying, you're paying. Tamura zu chalipin. When it says in the pasuk the term of tamura, this is referring to chalipin when you're exchanging two things. So we see that the term tamura is used in the pasuk together with yachlifano, meaning exchanging. Then it says l'kayim kol davar shalafish na'alei v'nasan l'reyeyu, to establish this and to take off the shoe and you give it to your friend. So this is the kinyan of chalipin. When you take off a shoe and you give it to your friend, and that creates a kinyan. Now, nasan me says the Braisa, who takes off his shoe and gives it to the other to create a kinyan. So that pasuk was talking about Boyaz. Boyaz was the buyer. So the Tanakh here says, Boyaz nasan legoyel. Boyaz, which was the buyer, he gave it to the goyel, which was the seller, and that's how the kinyan of chalipin takes effect. Like the opinion of Rav, that it's the buyer that's the one that gives his keli for the kinyan of chalipin. Okay, now Rabbi Yehuda however says, goyel nasan leBoyaz. Now the goyel, which in this case he was the seller, he's the one that gives the shoe to Boyaz, which was the buyer, and then with that hana, that he accepted the gift, in exchange for this hana, he sells the item. As two opinions we had before. Tane, in another Braisa we learned, kainin bekeli, you acquire with the kinyan of chalipin, and that you can use a vessel, ava b'shem b'shav pruta, even if it has no value of a pruta. Rav Nachman, on this Rav Nachman said, lo yishanu ela bekeli. It's only taught here that the kinyan of chalipin works if it's actually a vessel. Ava b'peidi, but to use fruits, or for that matter, anything that's not a garment or a vessel, like the kinyan of chalipin does not work. Shesha Samar, Rav Shesha says, afilu b'peidis. The kinyan of chalipin is even with fruits. My time with Rav Nachman. What's the source of Rav Nachman? Makra, because the pasuk, the source of kinyan chalipin, it says naloi, that he gives a shoe in exchange for the kinyan to take effect. So that's nalin, something that's like a shoe, any garment or vessel. Yes, that's good. Midiyachrini loy, something that's not like a shoe will not take effect. So therefore, peidis or anything like will not take effect. My time with Rav Sheshes. What's the source of Rav Sheshes that says that even if it's not like a shoe, it takes effect? Makra, because the pasuk then says l'kayim kol dovar, to establish with anything. So he says it means kol dovar, with any kind of item you could establish this kinyan. Rav Nachman, according to Rav Nachman, aksiv l'kayim kol dovar, the pasuk says you could establish it with anything. So why does he say only a keli, like the shoe? The answer is, no, that pasuk is read differently. L'kayim kol davar de nikna b'minal. What it's saying is that you can establish the kinyan, any kind of kinyan, the gola and the tmura, different kinds of kinyanim, you could establish any kind of kinyan with the kinyan of a shoe, or something similar to a shoe, which has to be a keli. But not that the kol davar is what's being used to create the kinyan itself. Now, Rav Nachman nami, I'm holding where it says, Rav Sheshes nami, Haksiv na'aloi, according to Rav Sheshes, the pasuk says it has to be a shoe. So why does he say that you can use anything else? Amalach Rav Sheshes will answer you, mal na'aloi, what we learn from the fact that it says a shoe is a davar mesuyim, it's a whole thing, a shoe, full, complete thing that you can wear on your shoes, on your feet that is. Av kol davar mesuyim. So too, for the kinyan of chalipin, you could use only something which is complete. Afuki chatzi rimoin, b'chatzi ega, is to use a half a pomegranate or a half a nut. That can't be used. The light, that doesn't work for the kinyan of chalipin. Amar Rav Sheshes b'reid Ravidi. Rav Sheshes, the son of Ravidi, said, "Kaman kasvina na'idna." According to who do we write now in a document regarding a sale that the kinyan was done with chalipin, and we describe the kinyan of chalipin as follows: b'mana de kosher, it was done with a kosher keli, lemikni beit, to acquire with it. What does these expressions mean to explain regarding the kinyan of chalipin? So the Gemara explains, b'mana. When we write that it has to be done with a keli, this excludes the opinion of Rav Sheshes that says that the kinyan of chalipin could be done even with fruits. When we say the word the kosher, that was done with something which is kosher, what does that mean? This excludes from what Shmuel said. Shmuel said you can use even a keli that's made out of the dung of animals. Even such a kind of cheap keli or something like that could be used as well. So we say that it has to be something kosher, meaning something that's more worthy, not something so dirty or so cheap. And then when we say lemiknia, what does lemiknia mean? this term means la fukim de Levi. It's coming to exclude Levi's opinion, the Amma bekelav shal makna. Levi says that it's the kalim of the seller that's used for the kinyan. So kamash malala mikne, we use the term le mikne, which means the one that acquires, v'loy la aknuye, and we don't use the term the one la aknuye, the one that's going to sell, because it's not the one that's selling that gives the keli, rather it's the one that buys that gives the keli. And the last word that we write in the shtar, bay, to acquire with it, bay sounds like we're excluding something else. Rav Papa says, lamute matbeya. We're coming to exclude, as we learned before, that all the Amiroim hold that you can't create the kinyan of chalipim by giving a matbeya as an exchange. But Ravzvid v'teimer Ravashi Omar, Ravzvid or Ravashi said, lamute isuri anov. The word bay is coming to exclude, you can't use an item that's forbidden to have any anov from it. Ikadamri, there's another version that said this as follows. Bay, regarding the word bay, Omar Papa lamute matbeya. The word bay is coming to exclude a matbeya. The kosher, the word that it said the kosher, what does that mean? It's the word the kosher that's coming to exclude something which is not kosher. It's also to have an anah from it. But to say that you don't have a kinyan with the murika or maruka, as the Gemara said before, for that you don't need any pasuk. It's obvious that it can't be used for the kinyan. Okay, this is the conclusion of the halachas b'negeya to chalipim. Now the Gemara comes back to what it said in the Mishnah. The Mishnah says, "Asimin kaina es amadbeya v'chulu," that if you have an asimain and the other person has a matbeya, so if you took the asimain, you made the meshicha on the asimain is considered to be a commodity, an object. It's not a matbeya, and therefore you did a meshicha in it. The other will be kaina the matbeya. But on the other hand, though, if you make the meshicha on the matbeya, you take the matbeya, that means you took money, took payment. Payment is not a kinyan for metaltlim. That was the halacha of the Mishnah. So here the Gemara will clarify what exactly this asimain is. Ma yasimain, what is this asimain? Amar Rav, so Rav says, Mois hanitnois b'simin lebeis hamerchas. This is money, or sort of a token that's given to the person that the bathhouse attendant that wants to know and take count of exactly how many people are in the bathhouse. So he takes a token from the people to be able to count to see what exactly he has to do to provide for them what they need. That's what it is, this kind of token. So the Gemara asks on this from what it says in the Mishnah. Meisvei, the Mishnah says, Ein mechalelin ma'aseh sheni ala simain. When you come to redeem and to be mechal, to deconsecrate the fruits of ma'aseh sheni, you can't do it on an asimain. It has to be money. The pasuk says v'tzarta kesef, so it can't be on an asimain. And then it says, and also not v'lei al mois anitnes b'siman lebeis hamerchatz. And you also can't be mechalel the fruits of ma'aseh sheni for this token that's given at the beis hamerchatz. So you see here clearly in the Mishnah, Miklal, it's clear that asimain lav mois anitnes b'siman lebeis hamerchatz. That this asimain is not this token that's given for the bathhouse attendant. It's something else. It says that in the Mishnah is two separate things. If you'll argue on this question and say, no, that is really one and the same thing, and he's just coming to explain what this asimain is, and he's then clarifying that the asimain is the mois which are given for the beis hamerchatz, or the token rather. But we can't say that because v'holi tanach, we didn't learn this way. It says in another Mishnah, "Mechalalin ma'aseh sheni al asimain divrei Rab Doisa." Rab Doisa actually says that you could be mechalal the fruits of ma'aseh sheni on this asimain. And the Chachamim say, "Ei mechalalin." No, you cannot use this asimain to be mechalal the fruits of the ma'aseh sheni. And the other Mishnah there says, "V'shavin." They both agree, "She'ei mechalalin al mois hanitnes b'simin lebeis hamerchatz." You can't be mechalal your fruits of ma'aseh sheni for the token that's given at the bathhouse. So you clearly see that this asimain and the token is two different things. Elam Rav Yochanan, Rav Yochanan says a different shot. Ma asimain. What is the asimain? Pulsa. Asimain is this blank of a coin that has not the shape and the picture has not yet been engraved in the coin. That's what the asimain is. Oh, the Rav Yochanan what Rav Yochanan says here follows what he says elsewhere. Rav Yochanan said that Rav Doisa and Rav Yishmael Amru Davar Echad. Both Rav Doisa and Rav Yishmael said the same thing. Rav Doisa Hadamaran. Rav Doisa is what we just quoted before, that he said that an asimain could be used to be mechalal the fruits of ma'aseh sheni on it. Rabbi Shmuel Maihi, where did Rabbi Shmuel say the same thing? The Tanya, as we learned, v'tzarta kesef biyodecha, that you're trying the money in a bundle in your hands. So what does it come to say when it says that it's in your hands? L'rabbis kol dava nitzre biyad. It's coming to add anything that you hold and you hide. It's small, you have it in your hands. It could be used to redeem the fruits of ma'aseh sheni. There, Rabbi Shmuel, this is what Rabbi Shmuel says. Rabbi Akiva says, no, l'Rabbis kol davar sheyesh alav tzura. It's coming to say that you can only do it with anything, any kind of coin that has a tzura on it. So you see over here clearly that according to Rabbi Akiva, it has to be something that has a tzura. According to Rabbi Shmuel, it's even this blank coin, which is the asimoin that Rabbi Doisa said, even with that you can redeem the Ma'aser Sheni because of the riboy of biyadecha. So this is Rabbi Yechanan's opinion that the asimoin is this blank of the coin, and both Rabbi Doisa and Rabbi Shmuel hold that it's okay to be used for Ma'aser Sheni. Going back to the Mishnah said, and here this is the basis of the whole inyan that the Gemara will explain now, that when it comes to the kinyan of metaltalin, the kinyan of kesef does not work. There has to be a kinyan of meshicha in the object itself. And therefore the Mishnah says, Keitzad moshach emenu peiris, if he did a meshicha in the fruits, v'lei nasan le'mois, and you didn't give money, any yachalach sabay. That is the act of the kinyan, the meshicha in the fruits, and therefore you can't be chayzer. But if you give money, and there was no kinyan meshicha, you could be chayzer, because the kinyan of kesef does not work for metaltalin. So here is where the Gemara brings the actual machlekes of Rabbi Yechanan and Reish Lakish about this that was quoted a few times before. Rabbi Yechanan, so Rabbi Yechanan says, Dvar teire mois kainis. Minat teire, the kinyan of kesef would work for metaltalin. Why did the Chachamim say that you have to have Mashiach in order to be kaineh? Gzeira, Chachamim decreed, Shema Yemel Nisr Fuchitecha Ba'aliyah, because if a fire breaks out, so then the seller is going to say that it was yours, and he's not going to go and bother to save it. It already belongs to the buyer, so it's going to get burnt, and he's not going to do anything about it. So the Gemara asks him this. Sof, that you're saying the issue is that there's a fire here and he's not going to save it. Well, if there's a fire, who exactly lit this fire here? Man the shadad leke boy shlumi. The one that created this fire, he's going to be the one responsible either way. So the Gemara says, Elo, the Gemara corrects it, Gzeira shema tipod leka, that the fire will just break out, be'oinus, which just happened with an oinus. No one lit this fire here. So imaik mislahu b'rishusei, if you're going to say that it belongs to the rishus of the buyer, or in the rishus of the seller, that is, that the sale did not yet take effect with money, then Masa Nafshei Torah Chamatzel. So then the seller will say to himself, it's still mine. I can still retract from this kinyan, and if the price goes up, I still have value for this. I can sell it to someone else for a greater price. So he's going to work hard to save it from the fire. But if you're not going to say so, and you're going to say that it's the kinyan is already in effect, it already belongs to the buyer, he's not going to go out of his way to save it from the fire. He has no loss involved in this for him. This is Rabbi Yechanan's opinion. Shlokish Amar, Shlokish says, Meshiche mufureshes min ha-Torah. That Meshiche, it says clearly in the Torah that the kinyan of metaltalin is only with Meshiche, not kesef. So this whole idea is not a gzeirim with the Rabbanon, it's a din min ha-Torah. So the Gemara brings the source. My time of the Reish Lakish. What's the source of Reish Lakish that the kinyan of metaltalin is with Meshiche or makra? Because the pasuk says, "V'chisimkero mimkar la misecha." You sell something to your friend, or you acquire something from your friend. So the term of miyad means davar anikne miyad liyad. You acquire an item from one hand to the other, which means you give it over. There's meshicha. You have to do an act of a kinyan in the thing itself, in the item itself, not with kesef. Rabbi Yechanan that says that there's no source of here for the kinyan of Meshicha, he says miyad, the term miyad is coming to say lemute karka de les be'ayno. In that parsha it speaks about the halachas of ayno, that if the payment was not fair, so then if it's a shtus or more than a shtus, it's a mekachtos. That halacha only applies to metaltalin, which is taken from one hand to another, and not regarding karka. The les be'ayno, there's no ayno that applies by karka. That's what we learn from the word miyad, but not the kinyan of Meshicha. Reish Lakish says, "In kain lichtav krav v'chisim kru mimkar miyad amisecha al tainu." The Gemara, the pasuk that is, could say if you sell, you're selling it from the hands of your friend or to the hands of your friend. It says it should say liyad amisecha. So then al tainu, do not trick him and overcharging him. Oy kanei lomali. Why does it add over here oy kanei, or you're acquiring? So what it's coming to say is, it says the word oikone right after miyad amisecha to say that one of the ways to acquire is through Meshicha. So therefore you can learn at this point there that it's referring to Meshicha because it says here oikone. But Rabbi Yechanan says oikone, when it adds, it's saying if you sell, and then it says or if you buy, it's not extra. It has to say both. What does he do to this? He says like this: it says in the Brayso, you're selling, there should be no eno. Don't overcharge. So I would think maybe it could only there's only a din of Eina, that it would be a mekach tos. That's if the seller overcharged, and the lekeach was the one that was tricked. How about if it's the reverse, where the buyer underpaid and it's an amount of a shtos, and how do we know then that the sale is not in effect? That's what the pasuk says as well. To say that even if the buyer is the one that was Eina on his behalf, that he did not pay enough for the seller, the kinyan is not in effect either. According to the Shlakish, how does he know this halacha as well, that the Eina is both for the meicher and for the lekeach? Shlakish says, Tarti Garma Minei. In the term that it says here in the pasuk, Miyada Misecha Oikana, you could learn out both points. When it says Oikana Miyada Misecha Al Tainu, so we understand that it means to say that Eina applies to a buyer as well, but also from the fact that it says the Oikana right after the words Miyada Misecha, we understand that the kinyan itself is also miyad, that you do it through Meshicha, taking it from the hand. So you can learn out both points here. Okay, so now the Gemara brings from the Mishnah the last opinion that there was in the Mishnah at the beginning of the Perek. So Tanan, the Mishnah there says, and here the Mishnah is talking about a case where the person did not do the kinyan of Meshicha for the metaltlin. He only paid for the metaltlin. The seller, the buyer that is paid for it, and as the Tanakama in the Mishnah said, because you pay money for metaltlin, the kinyan does not take effect. So the Tanakama holds the seller, the buyer, either one of them could have charata from this kinyan. And on this, Rav Shimon says, Kol sha'kesev biyadai, that only the seller that has the money that he was paid in his hands, yadei alol yaina, he has the upper hand, he's the one that could have charata from the kinyan, but the lekeach cannot. This is Rav Shimon's opinion, which means meicher hu dematzi hadabei. It's only the seller that's the one that could have charata, but lekeach lematzi hadabei. But the buyer cannot have charata. So what is the basis of Rav Shimon's opinion? What's the reason for this distinction? If you're going to say that minat Torah, really the kinyan of kesef does take effect from metaltalin. So then I could explain what Rav Shimon is saying here. Mishum hachi, therefore, meicher matzi hadabei, it's the meicher that's the one that can have charata, and lekeach lematzi hadabei, the lekeach can have charata, because it fits with the point that Rabbi Yechon has said before, that as long as the meicher could have charata from this kinyan, if only money was paid and there was no meshicha done yet, so then in the case of where there was a fire that broke out, the meicher will be motivated to save it from the fire because he could have charata. It has a value to him. There's no reason why the lekeach should have the ability to have charata. So we can understand what Rav Shimon's opinion is. But if you're going to say like Rish Lakish, that there is no kinyan of kesef for metaltalin at all. So if so, lekeach nami la'adabe, what difference does it make between the meicher and the lekeach? Both of them should have the ability to have charata because there is no kinyan here at all. Minat Torah. So the answer is Amalach Rish Lakish. Rish Lakish will tell you, Aliva de Rav Shimon loy kamina. True, according to Rav Shimon, my opinion does not work, because according to Rav Shimon, you're right. You must say that minat Torah, the kinyan of kesef does take effect, and it's just exeida that the meicher should be able to have charata, so he should be motivated to save it from a fire. What I said is according to the Rabbanan that kinyan kesef does not take effect from metaltalin at all, and therefore both the meicher and the metaltalin can have charata. So now the Gemara turns this around and says, if so, it's well understood now what the machlekes of the Rabbanan and the Rab Shimon is according to Rish Lakish. This is the explanation of the machlekes between Rab Shimon and the Rabbanan. Rabbanan hold that there's no kinyan of kesef from metaltalin at all, so therefore the lekeach and the meicher could have charata. And Rab Shimon holds, no, there is a kinyan of kesef minat Torah. It's just for the purpose that the meicher should save it from a fire, and therefore he could have charata, so he should be motivated to save it from the fire. But there's no reason that the chacham or misakin that the lekeach could have charata. So we understand the explanation of their machlekes. However, according to Rav Yechanan, what is the difference between Rav Shimon and the Rabbanan? So the Gemara answers, the difference between them is, even if you learn, like Rabbi Yechanan, that says that it's all exedim with the Rabbanan, but still there would be a reason why the Rabbanan would institute that the lekeach could have charata. Like Rav Chisda said, Rav Chisda said, Kederech shetiknu meshicha b'meichrin, just like Chachamim instituted the kinyan of meshicha regarding the meicher, and that is that the meicher could have charata until you do meshicha, kach tiknu meshicha b'lekuchais. So too they were masakin until you do meshicha, the lekeach could also have charata. Right? And the reason for this is, as Rashi explains, because this will further motivate the Meicher to save it from the fire. Because if the Meicher knows that the Lekeach can have Charata from this Kinyan, so the Meicher thinks to himself that if a fire broke out, the Lekeach is going to notice that a fire broke out, he's going to have Charata from the Kinyan right away, so therefore it's mine. I better save this from the fire. So therefore, what Rav Chisda is saying over here is, it's not enough the fact that we allow the Meicher to have Charata from the Kinyan to motivate him from saving it from the fire, but the fact that the Lekeach could also have Charata will even further motivate him to save it from the fire. Therefore, they could both have Charata. That was the additional point that Rav Chisda said. So this is the explanation of the Machlokes of Rav Shimon and the Rabbanan. Rav Shimon, less later Rav Chisda. Rav Shimon says, no, we don't know what Rav Chisda says. It's enough the fact that the Meicher could have Charata from the Kinyan to motivate him to save it from the fire. Rabbanan is later Rav Chisda. On the other hand, though, the Rabbanan say, no, Chachamim instituted that both the Meicher and the Lekeach could have Charata from the Kinyan, and then the Meicher will be motivated to save it from a fire when it breaks out.